G'day and welcome to the Rant Corner. Today we're going to be taking a look at Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet. And before we jump into the review, something new I want to do. I know I haven't put out a lot of videos, but I think it's something like this is important, right? To establish bias. Now I very clearly am a bit of a Pokemon fan, and so there'll be a fair few people out there that'll be like, oh, copium, or big fan, nostalgia, so on and so forth, right? Like that's one of the very common critiques that a lot of people get when they're trying to talk positively about a Pokemon game. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of negative stuff that we'll get to, don't worry. There's also a fair bit of positive stuff about the game. So before any of that jumps into it, I just want to say, yes, I'm a big Pokemon fan, have been for my whole life. I don't see that stopping at any time soon. There's also another couple of reasons why I want to start with bias, and that is, first off, in Australia, this is an $80 game, right? And so I know a lot of video game reviewers around, doesn't even matter who, tend to just sort of go, oh, I felt that was great, or to me this was a really good experience. It's like, okay, but you can't ask me to spend $80 on vibes. I shouldn't ask anyone who's going to watch this spend $80 because of my good vibes. And the reason why I bring that up is because I played Pokemon Scarlet. My partner played Pokemon Violet. And my experience of the game, we were playing simultaneously. She had the big TV, which is pretending to be a fireplace, and I had a small monitor off to the side. We were playing, because small apartment, right? So we were playing in tandem in that kind of a way. She had way more glitches than I did. In fact, my game, barring a handful of loading issues, which are very obviously apparent in the final product, apart from that, I had a pretty good run. In fact, if anything, I would call it a god run, right? Like, it was clean. It was just laggy. Fine. But I didn't have a lot of these glitches. Oh yeah, the camera kind of went through the floor a couple times. No worries. But it didn't stop being a playable experience for me. It very clearly has for other people, which is why I want to just start off by saying, big fan of Pokemon. I had a very fun time in the game. It wasn't riddled with bugs and glitches and nonsense, but I can understand why other people would feel that it most assuredly was. So let's get into what it is, and we're just going to roll in some positives in there as well, right? Nice and easy, right? It's what you want to know. It is an open world game. Now, I know some people did turn around and say, oh, but there's a couple of shops that you have to go into. It's like, well, Breath of the Wild's an open world game. You had to go into temples. Game Freak definitely delivered on the open world bit. It just doesn't run, and we'll get into that in a minute. So as always, Pokemon, it managed to deliver in all of the key areas that Pokemon games have always delivered in. We got banging soundtracks. We have a story that is 3 stories that then combine into one big story, and you have the freedom to explore all of them in any which way that you want. How good. So like, the whole game itself is actually surprisingly open. And I thought initially, because they did say that they weren't going to do like a flexible level cap situation. And in some other games that I've played recently, I've praised them for having a flexible sort of level difficulty thing. So the more shit you do, the harder it gets. I actually really enjoy that this had fixed levels in a few areas, because right next to, I think, like the bug gym, right off the bat, because I was an idiot, there's a psychic gym in, I think it's Alfornado or whatever it is, and I went there. That was my second gym. Turns out that was like the second from the last, just because I managed to grind up enough levels. I was like, yeah, I'm confident, I'll get it done. I should have paid way more attention to the fact that all the Pokemon around me were level 30s and 40s. I didn't. That's on me. But like, it was really, really cool to see that this one area was definitely a high level area. Get out, you've been dissuaded. I ignored that because I wanted to have fun instead. Now, the storylines were really, really big selling point for this game. You could run around and get some plants, you could run around and beat up some people, or you could run around and beat up some people in gyms. I like the fact that they got, out of the 3 storylines, the gym storyline, and just went, that's over here, don't worry about it. Beating up Team Star and doing a whole bunch of other nonsense with the flowers or whatever the fuck. Yep, that's over here. We're going to put our effort into the story over here. The Team Star storyline sort of just deals with a bunch of kids that become renegades because they were bullied. But then they weren't really bullies, but they still had people that were bullying other people. It felt like that storyline probably needed a little bit more work. But the Herba Mystica, Path of Legends, the cooking one with the plants, that had some shit I was not ready for. It was probably the most emotional story that we experienced in a Pokemon game, outside of Lucamine in Sun and Moon telling her children she wished she never had them. That was fucking brutal, by the way. And then she fused with a jellyfish and became a hentai monster, and I mean, I wasn't complaining then, I'm not complaining now. Yeah, they put some fucking elbow grease into that. They got some good storytellers over at Game Freak. It feels like they might actually finally be giving us what we want. And especially because that Path of Legends thing, that feeds a lot more into what happens when you complete those 3 storylines. Dun dun dun, right? Ominous. So when you finish those 3 stories, amazing, well done. You're a champion ranked student. Yeah, you beat up some teenagers and you made a bunch of sandwiches. Good stuff, right? Yeah, hell yeah, mad. Then comes the greatest tonal shift in a Pokemon game I have ever experienced. This shit goes from being like fucking Little Timmy shit to Final Fantasy shit quickly. There's no lube. It is just straight fucking in there, and it's just like, oh. I'm not giving that any spoilers, but I do want to say I was not ready for some of the turns, for some of the shit to happen, and I do want to give special props to the music. I'm not going to tell you what happens. I'm not going to tell you. But the music that plays when you move into this final area place that you go to, you do not feel comfortable, and things continue to happen which will not make you feel comfortable, and it's actually really well done. I was shitting myself for a good portion of what was coming. I was sitting there and be like, what the fuck? Like, I was freaking out. And it was nice because you have very few moments, I think, in a Pokemon game where you actually just like, oh fuck, which is why Nuzlocke and things like that exist. It was really cool to have that fear come back, like, you know, like that moment right back when you're playing like fucking Red and Blue, and then you run up to Mewtwo and you're like, hell yeah, and it's like level 70 and you're just like, right? It's kind of like one of those moments. But of course, with every positive thing I can say, there's also about a half a dozen negative things, and there's a few things that we definitely need to talk about. And the first one, of course, is performance. This thing handles like a baked potato. The Switch needed a performance model to come out before this game. That's not a question, that is a goddamn statement. This thing is not equipped for the hardware that it has. The Switch is old. There was probably meant to be a performance model to come out for the Switch, but this thing definitely needed a little, it needed a little bit more rev under its hood. It's not got what it needs. Hey, Marika. Hi, kitten. She's very asleep. I know, I'm sorry. I can sit here and say it lags. I can sit here and say that it's got a whole bunch of frame rate issues, but the person who did say it best was actually Small Ann, and I'm gonna run this clip just so you can understand that this isn't just like it drops frames every now and again. Like, this is actually a pretty big deal.
So when I save the game, I can check to see how much time we lost from lag. Profile. I've lost an hour and a half to lag. Like, that's how many frames we lost. 90 minutes worth of frames.
So that's massive. That kind of level of performance issue is legitimately, it's unforgivable. There is a caveat there, if you're interested. Because it's a console game, if you have purchased this game digitally, or you know someone who's purchased it digitally, get the whole game data and move it from the micro SD onto the actual console storage. Make as much room as you can, and however way you want to do it, and it'll run slightly better. It's not going to fix shit, I'm going to be honest, but it runs slightly better. And I think we can all agree slightly better is better than not at all. Shouldn't have to fucking do this in order to get the game to work. There is another small issue. It's a hard negative, soft positive. Okay, that's what we're kind of gonna, that's what we're gonna roll with describing it. The hard negative is that there's a lot of pop-ins, but it won't be as you get to an area, it'll be as they decide to be loaded in. It can get a bit dicey, right? So you could get stuck on a rock that's not quite there. Or you could run into the world's tiniest fucking Pokemon. Because this is the soft positive. Pokemon are closer, if not exactly, their accurate size is listed in the Pokedex. Less Sword and Shield, more Legends Arceus, and still going in a really nice direction. Although thankfully there's no whale lord. If that thing was to just suddenly appear out of nowhere, I imagine everybody's games would crash and it would be like a Five Nights at Freddy's jump scare, because that thing would be fucking huge. I don't think we realized how many small Pokemon were in Pokemon. I think we all thought they were kind of like, you know, here we go, like plushie size, right? It's like, oh look, it's a there's a Gengar. But like, oh, it's a Pikachu, right? Like, we didn't really think that they were actually going to be like, oh no, it's this big. It's like, oh. Shit. And when you're running through the world at speed, you're not gonna notice that shit hiding behind a poorly rendered blade of grass. You're gonna run right into that shit. And it's almost like sprinting around in the overworld, navigating around and doing all these sort of wonderful things that you would do in an open world game, and now suddenly a punishment. Hopefully, Nintendo lets Game Freak and whomsoever, like actual companies, come together. Maybe more than one company, because Game Freak clearly can't handle the workload. Hopefully multiple companies can come together, mix and match their experiences and create, and skills, right? And create this Pokemon world that was actually meant to be delivered but had not quite got there, and that definitely needed another couple of years in the kitchen, because that shit was undercooked, right? Like, it's raw. And so we come to the conclusion. Right? Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, are they worth it? Current state of the games. I'm having fun. That's me. This is the bias I warned you about at the beginning. Okay? I'm still loving the fuck out of the game. I would not recommend this to anyone for $80. I would not recommend this to anyone without a performance model switch. In fact, on about the second or third day, I actually had a lot of my mates come over to me and they were like, mate, you know, is it any good? Should I get it? Is it any good? I'm like, wait, it's not ready. Wait, a year and a half worth of patches post-release is not going to fix this game. I know there's a very thin hope that it's going to fix all the issues of the game, and as we've seen with Cyberpunk, not really. No, I don't see a year and a half extra fixing this. I can see performance issues being nutted out. I can see a performance switch making the experience a lot smoother, even for what it is, but this isn't a coated paint job. You're gonna need to upgrade the engine, the wheels, and the rest of the shit too. You can't slap a bunch of patches on a broken ass game and expect it to be better. There's no version of this where this becomes an easy sell, and that brings us all to the end. Scarlet and Violet, not worth it at current state. Performance switch, DLC, patches, maybe fix it. We don't know. We can hope. If you're still hoping. That's all for now. I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.